So, Johan, how far have you gone with your coffee? Let's see.
I'm all done. So it's a great pleasure to be here from our San Francisco office. I had the chance to have one of my colleagues who joined that early.
So I live in England and we always talk about the weather, right? Um, so it is around 9, 10 degrees today, like now. What is the weather over there?
San Francisco is a fun place because it's always sunny, but you always wear a jacket every day. There will be 1 hour during the day that you will need it. So this is something I learned the hard way. Don't forget your jacket here.
Michael.
Isn't that all the same weather all the time in London? Like rain 364 days a year?
Well, no.
Yeah.
When it's sunny, it's very beautiful, but to some extent, it's quite gray most times, right? But we just love to talk about the weather, right?
That's true. So I live in Toronto and it's been very cold winter this year. Right now I'm in our headquarters in Tel Aviv, so it's very nice, sunny outside. And my wife hates me because she called me just 5 minutes ago, says, "Hey, it's snowing again. You bastard. What are you doing there? Come home. Start shoveling."
When do you fly back?
Tomorrow evening.
Oh, nice. Safe
Yeah.
travels. Safe travels.
We got
Okay.
good attendance. Over 70 people joined, so yeah, that's good.
Great. So I think we can start.
Maybe
I think
give
so.
it
I think so too as
another,
well.
yeah, another 30 seconds and so, and we can start.
So it's like feels like we should have that music sort of like stuff, right? Like, call waiting kind of thing. Like someone should sing, right? Like whilst we wait for like 30 seconds. Singing is not my talent, so I'll probably just zip up at some
Please
point
don't
now.
ask me.
Neither is mine, so yeah, no pressure, but somebody gotta sing.
Cool.
All right.
I think we're good to go, right? It's
Yes.
3 minutes past the hour. So we've got really good attendance here. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar. As you know, this webinar discusses the streaming latency report, right? So that's why we're here. So I don't know about like anyone here, but if you were as curious as I was when I saw a LinkedIn headline stating that OTT streaming latency beats traditional broadcast for live sports, I was like, oh, really? How? This webinar is for you, right? So here we really unpack the setup, how it was measured, gives you like the opportunity to ask directly questions to Johan, to Michael, and we also talk about like some of the work we're doing within SVTA and the challenges of latency streaming. This is for you. So thanks for joining. And just FYI, there is a Q&A sort of like box section. So please put in your questions in there and we'll try to tackle them and answer them as we go along. For those that we can't, we would reply offline. All right. I think so far we have about 102. So no pressure on Michael and Johan, right? So let's start. So I read on LinkedIn, right, that to be on Fire TV was 2.6 seconds ahead of Spectrum. Can you tell us what you mean by Spectrum and how is that even possible, right? Like just walk us through the process of baselining the test that you did, Johan.
Yes, thank you, Florence, with pleasure. So for that, I will share my screen. So I always like to have a So everyone can see it right now? Thank you. So the way we are measuring the video services is fairly straightforward. What we do is that we behave like a user. So here you can see on the left side in our office in San Francisco, what you see is a Fire TV. So this was the Fire TV that has been used, Fire TV Stick 4K. On this Fire TV, we took a real account and we connected the Fire TV to that automated user. So this is the Witbe Witbox. It's connected in HDMI, and the Witbox behave like a user. And you have all the other environment that we tested. So we tested on Apple TV 4K, on Samsung Smart TV natively. And as you mentioned, we use the Spectrum cable TV as a reference because this has been the traditional way to watch live sports in the US. Cable TV, DVB-C were coaxial, and it's still widely used in all the sports bar and also in the main TV. Out of the different locations, it was tested in New York, San Francisco, Montreal, and Paris on a wide variety of devices, including the Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku, Spectrum, Verizon. We also had a satellite set-top box in Paris. But I want to emphasize that it's really the application that the users are using and the real account. So what the Witbox is doing is navigating in the UI. So here it's launching Tubi, clicking on Watch Live, measure how long does it take to have this initial buffering time. So here you can see the evolution pattern of this initial buffering time measured as a user, and do that automatically for all the devices in real time. So this is, here you can see all the devices watching the half game, the halftime show. And uniquely to this particular time, thanks to our partnership with TAG, we have leveraged this integration to use the content matching to measure the latency. So here we selected Spectrum as a reference, and we measure against that reference to see if it was ahead or later, and based on what's happening on the screen. So we did not use some kind of timestamp or anything. It's really based on what is displayed.
Oh, now I get that, right? So your reference, right? It's the cable, the broadcast TV, right? And then you do plus, minus.
It could have been any, but we chose that as, because why not? During the,
yes,
all the pre-event, it was the fastest. So we say, okay, it's the fastest, let's take the fastest. But during the game, we saw that it was different.
That's a pretty niche way of doing that, right? Without having access to the source. Just wanted to backtrack a bit. So we're talking about the 59th edition of Super Bowl, right? So just going through the NFL website, I love numbers, right? About, like, on the website, it says 128 million US viewers. That's massive, right? Across television and streaming in the US, right? Only that's, I don't know how much of a scale you can get, right? It's just massive. That takes me to my other question. So I have been in the industry for quite a while, right? For 15 odd years. Why is this type of experiences, i.e., being closer to the live edge, why is it becoming more important now?
The thing is that the delivery path or the protocol, the multi-CDN, a lot can happen between the source and what you get on screen. Traditionally, 15 years ago, it was mostly either through cable or through satellite. So it's a simple path. If you follow the path, you make sure that you don't have too much packet loss. In the way, you're almost guaranteed to know that it's working for sure. Here you have a wide variety of devices, of player, of codec capability, of decoding capability, the way they manage the playback, the DRM. So the complexity expanded, and on this kind of devices, you don't control the operating system, someone else does. You don't control the recommendation engine, someone else does. So it's guessing what's happening as a user is almost impossible without having a look at it. For sure, you can control up to a certain point, but at the end, if you want to make sure that, yes, your pre-roll advertisement, which is happening on the device, has been properly played, there is no other way than use a real device with a real account on the real application. It's extremely hard to guess otherwise.
Thanks, Johan. Thank you. So for those that don't know me, right, I work for Sky, and Sky is part of the Comcast, family, and I also wear a second hat. I chair with Michael the low latency streaming working group within SVTA, right? And in all of my time as one of the co-chairs of SVTA, that group, we really struggle to see like reports on latency and end-to-end latency measurement, right? Why did you do this report, like, and making this sort of like, available right now? Because it is something that's not readily available within the industry. I think that's to you, Johan, and then to Michael as well.
So the different protocols. So when switching from the broadcast to the OTT delivery using ABR, the content has been so we used to have a stream, single stream TS, and the content had to be chunked in pieces of usually between 2 and 10 seconds. At the beginning, it was 10 seconds. So this 10 seconds of creating a packet, sending it, getting on the packager, on the CDN, and on the player, and all this buffer tend to add up all this delay. With all the low latency protocols, the goal is to remove that and be able to kind of get back to a stream by being able to start consuming the beginning of the content while it's still being produced. And all from the packager, the CDN, the player, all the way down. And the buffer is very tight, and the goal is to be as close as possible to what was a stream before. But it brings a lot of challenges in terms of scaling, and a lot of complex pieces has to really fit together to have it working at scale.
Thank you, Johan. Michael, why this report now? Why did TAG partner with Witbe, right, to do this report?
Well, it's really not just now. You and I have been dealing with latency and researching these low latency challenges for quite a few years now. And I always been interested in this question of how do we reduce latency with this technology switch to OTT streaming from the traditional cable. And one of the reasons we chose Spectrum is because everybody always compares low latency streaming to the traditional methods such as cable to IPTV, broadcast over the air, and other methods, which traditionally have been relatively low latency. So we're always trying to figure out different methods to reduce the latency and come back to the source to achieve the same latency as the broadcast. And we're also looking for different methods to measure latency. So, for example, we published as part of the SVTA work we've been doing, we published a document on the different methods how to measure latency, and we're also surveying the industry. And right now we are in the middle of a survey that we're asking the industry to contribute to and tell us what they do to reduce latency, what kind of protocols they're using, and what kind of latencies they're able to achieve. So that's a key question that everybody asking themselves as I travel the world and I see customers and I talk to people who are doing streaming, and I talk to service providers and streaming platform vendors and others. Latency is one of the key subjects that concerns them.
I think we got ahead of ourselves here, right? We got too excited, right? We're talking about latency, low latency. What is latency, right? Like, what are we talking about? What is the definition of latency? Like, what is it we're trying to measure?
You're absolutely right. When we deal with this every day, it's kind of becomes obvious, right? So latency is the time between point A to point B. The question is, what is that point A to point B? And there's many different points on the way, from the camera, from the glass to the screen, the other glass, right? So glass to glass latency, but it's only one part of latency. There's other latencies such as encoding latency, transcoding latency, packaging latency, delivery. CDN may add some latency. So there is different points on the way that the latency can be measured, and things that can increase the latency, such as using no low latency streaming protocols, for example. And there is certain points on the way where we can implement different methods to reduce that latency. Again, using low latency protocols. So they obviously they are changing the way we're streaming. They require a different approach to delivery mechanisms. They require adjustments on the player side. But we always have in mind this one thing: what is the latency between the actual event happening on the field and the time that it takes for the consumers to see that? Is that 1 second, 15 seconds, maybe 40 seconds? And in different industries, broadcast is not the only industry that interested in latency. There's others like e-gaming and betting that require ultra low latency. So latency is a lot of things.
Yeah, for cloud, and it really depends on the application. For cloud gaming, for example, anything exceeding 100 milliseconds for a fast-paced game like a racing game would be too much. But obviously, for live sports events, nobody will try to reach 100 milliseconds. It will be too difficult to scale, too costly. And in the end, as long as you don't receive the notification that something is happening, there is little chance that you will be spoiled. So of course, for betting, it can be interesting, but for the average user watching the content, anything within the range of a few seconds will be fast enough to not get disturbed and get the notification, get the information that something is happening beforehand.
Thank you. So as part of the work that Michael and I do within SVTA, right? As part of that work, as part of testing and measurement part on the SVTA test lab, we've done some sort of like, how do you actually measure latency, the methods to actually, measure latency. We've got a well-documented publication on that, whether it's, timestamp burnt into the video frame. We know that doesn't really scale to production users. We also tried using metadata that are embedded in the bit stream. We ran into problems because different, vendors and different timings, is it UTC, is it whatever timings you have in there, is it always present in the bit stream? We ran into problems in there. And then there was like this sort of like, fingerprinting. So I would strongly encourage folks here to read that publication. So we've done two publications. One is how to reduce latency, and then the other one is how do you actually measure it. And I guess I'm just gonna put a bit of focus on Michael right now, maybe to just talk about like the fingerprinting technology, I guess. And correct me if I'm wrong, I guess that was used as part of this Super Bowl latency testing. Do you want to just talk more around the fingerprinting method to measure latency?
Yes, of course. So you mentioned some of the methods to measure latency, like the metadata, that there's a lot of challenges with that. Metadata doesn't always propagate through every single device. It changes. There is different formats of timestamps on different sides and protocols. So that's challenging when you need to keep the same timestamp all the way from camera to the screen. There's burnt time codes. Well, those you cannot do that in production. And also the very low-tech methods where you're basically pointing the camera at the clock and then you compare what you see on the screen. Again, not production grade method. So for production, how can you measure latency? So we have this technology called fingerprinting, which is it's a SMPTE standard. I believe the number is ST2064, something like that. That talks about how to generate fingerprint. What TAG did was to improve that standard and that algorithm of creating the fingerprints. And then we created a mechanism to use the fingerprints and match across fingerprints from different streams. So unlike a watermark that you have to put into the video stream, fingerprint doesn't modify anything on the stream itself. It just looks at the video and generates a very small, tiny number, binary number. Then that number being sent to a centralized location where we have the algorithm to compare those fingerprints from different locations. What that gives us is the ability to align between those two different video streams. And those two video streams could be from any type of streaming protocol. It could be MPEG-TS, it could be uncompressed video in 2110, it could be OTT, HLS, or MPEG-Dash. Doesn't matter. As long as we can look at the video frames, we can generate fingerprints. And then we compare between those fingerprints, and we can tell you on both sides what are the frames that are identical to each other. By the way, this technology works across transcoding, so even if you transcode it from one resolution to another, you can still compare and identify similar frames. And then once we know that the frame on stream A is the same as the frame on stream B, we know the timing of those two frames, and we know the exact precise latency between those two video streams. The fingerprint is created on the receiving side. So in this case of the Super Bowl test, we were using Witbe, like Johan explained, connected to real set-top boxes, and we were creating the fingerprints. Then using the TAG technology and TAG products, we measured the latency across all the different devices and set-top boxes and players.
I'm going to put you on the spot, right? So what is the accuracy of that fingerprinting? And does it have any edge cases? Like it should, right? Like tell us the accuracy first.
Of course. In fact, it's so accurate that when we first got the results and we looked at the results, we said, no, that cannot be, because we don't expect the latency to change all the time. You know, when you send an MPEG-TS, yes, you have some little jitter on the wire, that's okay, but the player will put the frame depends on the frame rate, let's say every 40 milliseconds on the screen, right? And we saw that the numbers are actually fluctuating a little bit. But then when we started digging into that, we understood that that's normal because there is different buffers and the player is not always very linear. And when we did a little more investigation, we identified that the accuracy of the fingerprinting and content matching, that's the name of the technology that matches the different fingerprints, is about 1 to 2 frames. So we're not even talking here about seconds or anything like that. It's in milliseconds, so it's pretty accurate.
Any edge cases?
The edge cases would be OTT. OTT like HLS and Dash because of the buffer. So the question is, what do you consider being the OTT latency? Is that when the file was created? And then we're talking about segments of sometimes 10 seconds long, right? So is that a 10-second additional latency on the segment, or do we summarize all the segments? Do we act as a real player device and say, you know what, the player would buffer maybe three segments, maybe less? Like there's so many different questions here. So I think doing it together with Witbe, because we actually looking at the video post the player. So we eliminate all those questions, and we actually can tell you what the latency as it is being seen on the device itself, being at the smart TV or mobile phone or laptop.
Thank you.
And if I may, what was very interesting also during this, the reason why it was a great success, this partnership, in that this algorithm is very resilient to some changes. And at first, we didn't know what to expect, but for the stream which we have captured, that we have analyzed from Canada and from France, obviously you don't have the same content all the time. Advertisement that's being replaced. You can have different presenter. So the content will not be the same all the time. And maybe, especially in France, because of the way the content is being done, sometimes less than 70%. And it was still accurately measuring, because this 70% of accuracy, it was able to rematch it, even though advertisements were replaced. And it was funny seeing that during that the content was not matched, and after it was match again, not match again, and see the latency in between being successfully measured.
Thank you. So we've got about 115 participants here. So whilst I've got you here, Johan, right, I think you need to indulge us in that report, right? So
sure.
Let's dive into that key findings that's just been on LinkedIn and everywhere. Like, talk us through the results.
Yes, absolutely. So I will share back my screen.
This is the one.
Yes, absolutely. So these are the results. As mentioned, we use a spectrum as a arbitrary reference, mostly because during our dry run test, it was the fastest one. And what the big finding of this event is that Tubby was faster, and on Fire TV, it was 2.6 seconds faster than cable TV on average. And it was pretty consistent over time. So this latency did not change during the load. So we continue measuring the latency. We also did our testing protocol was that every 15 minutes, we would exit the application, re-enter the application to make sure that if there was a drift that was happening, it was a mix between long session and short session, and also the ability for newcomers to rejoin the content. And it was stable, fast, and without defect. So really, if we have anyone involved in this tech delivery, congratulations. It was a great job, and very impressed with what you've achieved. And we know that you have done some very specific fine-tuning to get it right. When we decommissioned the system on the next day, during the parade, it was nowhere near that number. So it was really something specific for the event that has been set up, and that was very successful.
So whilst we've still got this here, this screen here, right? Like, do we think that there were like any specific technologies, right, used to lower this latency we see on the green ones? Like, can we, I don't want to use the word speculate, but do we think anything special was used?
Yes, so usually here we could have, but we did not take network capture to analyze what was happening on the network side. So it wasn't not part of the test bed here. So it's a bit of speculation, and I would be happy to discuss with the tech involved. But usually on Fire TV, MPEG Dash is the chosen packaging method. On Apple TV, it's usually HLS. So here, considering that Toby has put the same amount of effort between Fire TV and Apple TV, we expect that they use the low latency flavors of MPEG Dash and HLS, and that they were able to leverage some advantage of MPEG- low latency versus HLS low latency on Apple TV. And this is also something that we saw on other MVPD that we tested, that on Fire TV, usually they were able to perform better than on Apple TV. And on the native players of the smart TV, it's not achieving that same level of performance. So we see, but it's not unexpected that on smart TV it's more challenging. It comes from the fragmentation, for one. It's hard to get it right for all the potential models of Samsung, LG, Vizio, Hisense, all the way they implemented their generation of operating system which support the protocol in very, very different ways. And also another thing is that it's easier to ship one of those small devices to your development team or your testing team, so that it's standard that people have spent more time fine-tuning on the small devices than fine-tuning on the smart TV. Even though smart TV is becoming native smart TV application, has become the screen most used for streaming. So the numbers are switching from set-top box and sticks to native smart TV application. So it's at the same time challenging, but very, very important to make it right.
I think whilst you're here, I'm going to pick some questions from the Q&A, and I think you've just talked about smart TV, and I think you've answered it before, but just for like clarity, someone has asked, and how do you test on smart TVs?
So we do use real smart TV. So if I take back that screen here. So here we have one smart TV. I don't find it, sorry. But one of the devices is a smart TV. And we really look at the screen as a user. So one of the devices, it's a real smart TV in the real application. This one. This one is a smart TV that was playing a 2B. And we provide a whole testing environment so that it's capturing audio and video from the TV, but it's not modified. We do not take the TV apart. We do not emulate the TV in an emulator. It's really the real TV. We purchase the TV and we use that one. We install the application from the store, and our robot has a remote navigating in the TV and looking at the screen. It's really as a user, but in a fully automated way that you can use remotely.
Thank you. I will take another one. If you want to put back the one that has the streaming latency report, the numbers and all of that with 2B and all of that in there. Eric has asked how far it's over the air latency back from the actual game.
So we did not test it over the air in the US, but we did have this satellite feed on top from France, which was very close. It was once half a second earlier than the 2B on Fire TV. So we did not try over the air feeds in the US.
Okay,
I would expect, based on the different reports and blog posts that we saw, that it would be within the same range of the satellite feed, but no confirmation as the test was not done.
Okay, I'll take another one. And I think you've answered this, but William has asked, which streaming protocols gave the lowest latencies?
I don't have that answer. Here I can speculate that it would be MPEG- low latency. A lot of people are talking also about PSI, which is proprietary being used by Amazon. But I'm talking about broadcast type protocol, the protocol that scales very well. Obviously, when you want to do like we do here, one-to-one, one-to-many, it would be more WebRTC, which is widely used, which is closer to 100 millisecond latency. And if you want to go lower than that, it would be totally other type of protocol, but more point-to-point, like the one that are used for cloud gaming or robotic manipulation over 5G, which is totally a different subject here. And it's not scalable to millions of users.
Thank you.
Florence, I just wanted to add to that question about the protocols. So we are doing the survey across the industry on which protocols are being used mainly for different types of applications like sport broadcasting and others. The survey is not complete yet, but I think just looking at the results so far, the biggest portion of obviously goes to HLS and MPEG-Dash, and about half of that is low latency HLS and low latency MPEG-Dash, followed by WebRTC. So WebRTC is right now is number 3, but it's absolutely growing, and with all the challenges of delivering WebRTC at scale and so on, but it's a growing protocol that has its place in the industry.
Thanks, Michael. I hope you feel better now. Okay, cool. So with latency, there is this triangle of compromise, right? Latency, reliability, quality, right? You have to compromise and, get that balance, the sweet spot. As part of your measurement, did you notice any like service quality issues or any quality issues or reliability issues?
So what's one of the very interesting fact about this measurement is that the one who performed better on latency also performed better in terms of quality, stability, and availability. So we did see a few availability issues. So mainly when you launch the application, it will not go load the stream, even if you wait a while. But that was not on the fastest applications, which is great. Again, they managed to keep the latency low while keeping the quality, which is very notable. And we did see a bit of change in the initial buffering time, but very well managed. It was from 1 second to 3 seconds during the halftime show. So that is perfectly acceptable for everyone. I mean, having only 3 seconds is totally fine, as long as you get your content and your quality after that.
And just to add to that, so there is actually a question in the Q&A section about whether buffering is a concern, just like latency. The answer is absolutely yes, and it seems to be a trade-off. You're trying to reduce the latency, so it comes with reduced buffering or no buffering at all when you need to read chunks that are being written to the disk, just like at the same time as the player is reading them. So absolutely, buffering is a concern, but there is methods to deal with this, and as a result, show they did a good job.
Thanks, Michael. Whilst I've got you here and you're still able to talk, there's a question in there, and it's around measurement, right? It's saying, anonymous, I wonder, is the latency measured in every step in the delivery chain? How would a customer device know the timestamp of the live edge on the streamer device?
So ideally, when you measure latency, you want to measure it at every step on the chain, right? So you want to measure it right after the camera. You want to measure it after the encoding is happening, after the transcoding, the packaging. So there's 7 different points on this way that SBTA identified as critical. And unfortunately, in this particular case, we were not able to do that because the test was kind of provider agnostic, and we did it from the set-top box side. So in order for us to measure latency, we had to pick one of those set-top boxes as the reference point and compare the latency. And that's where the what spectrum was in this case. But yes, when you monitoring your own services and you have access to those different points on the way, that's where you want to put the measuring devices and do the measuring.
Yeah, ideal deployment would be this kind of deployment where you get the source, you get the encoder, the packager, and the device. That way you can see all along the chain. TAG is extremely well suited for everything that is on the left, would be after the devices. This is why it's such a great partnership. You see all the way along from the source to the device and every step of the way, which was not what we did during the Super Bowl monitoring because we were not having the left portion, but it really makes sense as a whole. And to answer the question about the timestamp, the great thing that there is no need to have the timestamp to the content matching. It's purely visual. So even if you have something happening like a cloud transcoding, if you get the source from something else, if you have reprocessing of the video in the middle, it's all right. It will still be matched, even though the pixels are different, the packaging is different, the TS has been changed to MP4, and everything is different with CMAF container and everything. But as we are looking at the pixels, after the decoding, the DRM and everything, then we can do this correlation.
Yeah, and there was a question in the chat about fingerprint is used to compare relative latency between two streams received on consumer devices, how to measure the absolute latency from streamer camera to consumer device. In the exact same way, you just need access to that stream. If you have access to the camera, the output of the camera, and you can put the measuring, the fingerprint generating device, which is the TAG real-time monitoring system in this case, then you can generate the fingerprint from that stream and compare it to the stream in every point on the way, and post Witbe device as well, post set-top box.
Thanks, Michael. I love this diagram, right? Please put it back up. I love it. I love it, right? It shows a very high level, simplistic version of a live workflow, right? Like this is so simple, but in the real world, it's chaos with different components at different hops, at different, like it's a matrix of blobs everywhere. And is that why, latency is so challenging in live streaming? I say this because I've got something to share. So within the low latency working group within SVTA, we're currently running a survey, and I'm not sure if that link to that survey has been posted here. If not, it should. We are trying to gather like responses from people that knows streaming very well, right? And so far we've gotten really good response rate. And I was just before this webinar, I took out like one question that we asked in that survey. So please go in and fill that survey. It's less than 2 minutes, you'll be done. I dived in and I just picked just one question, right? And the question was around, hold on, I'll just share my screen because I have analyzed it. It's something else. Hold on. Someone else is sharing. Let me.
I stopped. Yeah.
Okay.
You should be.
Share. So I took just one question from that survey, and the question, and this is the question, right? It was question 12. What are the biggest challenges your company faces in delivering low latency streaming? And this really goes back to that workflow you were showing, right? Like it's everywhere.
Yes,
right?
There is not one single big challenge. It's pretty much all along the chain.
And this is coming from not one person. I think we're targeting to have like 3 digits, in there in terms of, respondents, right? And it's all scattered, right? It's this is food for thought for us, right? That it's not easy, right? And I think this just goes to show like we need to really give kudos to to the report and to those that have beat broadcast latency
'em? Yeah, it was a success all along the chain. You cannot reach that number by just fixing one of the items. You cannot just fix only the transport or only the player or only reduce the buffer. You have to grab all that precious seconds all along the chain in order for it to add up, and ranging from 30 seconds that we see on the list performing down to -2 seconds.
And we usually talking about the streaming portion of that, like what protocol was used. Is it low latency HLS, WebRTC? Some people mentioned PSI protocol in the chat here. But we tend to forget that latency is not only on the streaming side, although that's probably the biggest contributor to the latency. But latency can be caused by things like transcoding and packaging as well. And it's important to also pay attention to what encoding technology you use. And today there's new encoders that are available, that some of them using some advanced algorithms and even implementing AI to reduce the latency and reduce the time it takes to transcode the frame. So and of course packaging, the shorter segments you make, or if you support chunk transfer mechanism or not. That's all those things will influence the latency.
So are there any, so apart from what we see here on screen, right, from a monitoring side of things, is there any other sort of like challenges you see in terms of monitoring from the device side, from the stream side, just to throw more in the sink?
One item here that I find kind of funny is that network reliability is reported as an issue, but QoE impact not. It's kind of, yes, if we want to reduce the latency, there is an issue that the network will not be enough, but not an issue that if this is happening, the user will have an issue. It's something that is difficult to assess by just looking at the whole way of playing decoding is changing with the low latency protocols, and getting the player metrics which are inside the player is surely not strong enough to evaluate and guess what's happening on the screen. So here we at least it's our strong belief that if you really want to see what's happening, you have to see it at some point. You cannot guess it from the metrics. You have to see the video, actually look at it either automatically or with humans, but have the video, not just metrics about buffer underrun, time to playback, or packet loss.
Okay, I'm trying to find my mouse now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna stop sharing now. Hopefully it goes cool. So if you haven't filled this survey, please fill this survey. That's a lot of benefit doing that, because one, you get to contribute and your voice heard in the industry. Two, you get a copy of the outcome. So when we analyze the data and all of that, we're going to make it available to you. So i.e., if you leave your like email address in there, we send you a copy of the final version. So please go fill it, and let's have your voice in there. So I've got my last question before we start going into questions, the open questions in the Q&A. So my last question, this is for me, very personal and the holy grail. So I mentioned, I talked about the triangle of compromise, like latency, reliability, and quality, that's a trade-off in there, right? And I think this is where we can do like A/B experimentation, right? To sort of like help make business decisions, like how do we crank up or crank down, what's the compromise to like QoE? And I'm not sure if it's part of the measurement, the latency measurement, that we have, that Witbe, you have like, you know, QE metrics to that. My question is, when do you think that measuring end-to-end latency, right, as a metric, right? So end-to-end latency as a metric, as well as other QoE metrics, become an off-the-shelf product? Is that ever going to happen? If so, when?
And for me, it's already off the shelf. It's the fact that it's non-reference, non-intrusive. You don't need, and this is what we demonstrated. We did not need to ask anybody about adding SDK somewhere, adding a watermark, adding a timestamp, adding metadata. It's really, the beauty of this is that it's purely based as end user interaction. What you can see, what your neighbor can see, what I can see, and compare it and measure the quality, the video experience, the loading time, and the delay being one additional KPI. But it's I mean, we can do it right away, and this is a proof. It's not, no integration, no change in the delivery chain, and available as day one.
Is that for every viewer? So every
No.
128
No,
million viewers, at what point do we
absolutely
get
not.
there?
No,
At what point do we get a latency metric as well as QoE for every
yeah,
user?
but yeah, after it's do we need it? Does it make sense? Is getting more data. The question about QoE metrics from it's very interesting, but it's also by nature very noisy. I have my phone, I will go in the elevator afterward, I will have rubber frame. Yes, it's true, it's a real rubber frame that happened on my screen. But because I was in an elevator. What does it tell you about the quality of your delivery? You don't know. I wasn't in an elevator, it's not really an issue. Or I was in the subway trying to do some Instagramming. So it's totally complementary. It's not one that replaces the other. It's two different points of view of the same reality. One is the whole engagement, how long, what are the duration, how long each and every user stayed on which content, what was the swiping pattern, how they move from this to that. And in the stadium, this was this level of quality, but it's a different view that sampling, having the video and seeing the reference. I don't think one will replace the other.
It's probably the best explanation I ever heard. It's very great, and I agree. People do collect data, and data is super important. And the data is for analysis and general understanding of your streaming quality. But when we're talking about specific QE metrics, QS metrics, they first of all have to be actionable. And if Johan goes into elevator, there is nothing for me to actionable. Like his quality drops, but can I do something with this? So the metrics that the providers and streamers focus on are something that their operators can act upon and in real time and fix. And if it's something they have influence over, but if it's something in the wild, okay, it's good to know. It's important to know. I don't disagree, but not actionable.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Michael. I think we've got like 6 minutes, and maybe we've got just enough time to start going through some of the open questions in the Q&A, and then we see how far we get. If we run out of time, we would follow up offline on those questions. Okay, so I'm going to start from top, how I see it on my screen. So there's one from Eric. How can low latency protocols like WebRTC, low latency HLS, and SCI be scaled to reach 30 million plus subscriber viewers?
That's a challenge for sure. A lot of paper and technical proposition are published. A lot of CDNs are saying that they can help in scaling. Usually, most of the what we see in the industry is a multi-approach. So it's usually not a single CDN. It's a mix of depending on who is the broadcaster, sometimes cloud-based CDN, traditional CDN, and also home-built CDN or open caching. It's really, I don't think there is one single answer for that. And yeah.
Okay, I'll go to the next one.
But you can contribute to that if you join the SVTA and join one of the working groups, because there's a lot of work that's being done on to reduce the
we are a member, but I truly want to apologize because I have not been participating a lot in the working groups.
How come I haven't seen you in the low latency working group?
Sorry about that. I think I need to fix it. And I really need. I was in Amsterdam for the SVTA meeting at the IBC, but yeah, not participating a lot in the working group. And Noemi told me a lot about that, so I think I should fix that.
Okay.
Everybody welcome to join, and it's really fun, and we really do great stuff. And just recently, Dash IF joined SVTA, so yes. Dash is now part of SVTA as well.
Over 140 companies in SVTA. Just going through to the next one. I'm just conscious of time here. Another one from Eric. What if we could remove, so I think this question is relating to how do you reduce the latency, right? What if we could remove the packager delay by sending MPEG TS all the way to the device? Ooh.
It was the multicast, IP multicast over managed network, which is a traditional IPTV in Europe, which was not deployed a lot in the US. This has been because they had a very strong DVB-C over coaxial network. But this is indeed CS directly to the end consumer device. So very good for live, very scalable, very hard to make it work on unmanaged network.
Oh, thank you. Just skimming through now. Another one from Udaya. What encapsulation did you use for the OTT Super Bowl feed that was compared to Spectrum cable feed?
We don't manage the encapsulation. We use it as the end user. So we don't control how each of the player embed their stream or anything. We just use the native application, the standard as a customer.
Cool, thank you. There's another question from Anonymous, right? I think this is not relating to measurement per se, but he or she is asking around adjusting the ABR logic to be responsive enough to mitigate, the risk of rebuffering, right? That wasn't part of this work.
But it's part of the challenge on the ABR side. So when you are not dealing with low latency flavors, you have usually 2 to 10 seconds buffer, which is sometime enough to adjust if you see that you won't get the chunk fast enough, or if you start having packet loss, or that the TCP window is being exhausted. You can take actions on the player side. The player can take action to lower the bitrate fast enough so there is no buffering. This was the initial intent of all the ABR protocols. Fast enough so that you don't have buffering, reduce the quality, and it's better for the user. But as you have the buffer, which is very, very small, smaller than TCP retry, that's also why a lot of media transport is also either thinking or already being moved to HTTP quick. So quick is which is over UDP, not TCP anymore. It's very good for the mobile network, which tend to have a lot of jitter and packet loss. You don't lose the 3 seconds of TCP retransmission delay. And that's in other studies that we've done on the vertical video, like Instagram, YouTube Short, and TikTok, a lot of these applications are indeed using HTTP quick to deliver their video.
We've got like less than 60 seconds. So Michael, the last question is for you. Any other questions would be sort of like followed offline. Michael, 10 seconds answer for you. Can Witbe monitor WebRTC or SAI?
That'll be a question for Witbe. I can tell you about TAG. TAG can monitor many different protocols, all of which are used in broadcast, including WebRTC, low latency HLS, low latency Dash. And that's the power of TAG monitoring system. We can monitor every single protocol. And if you can find one that we don't, well, that's easy to add because we have very flexible architecture in the backend.
Johan, can Witbe monitor WebRTC or SI?
Yes, and as long as it's being displayed on the device, we can monitor it because we don't care. So even if you invent a new protocol on your lab, which is only known by you and it's very proprietary, we can see it as long as your users can see it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much, Johan. Thank you even so much to the participants, right? We've got 80 till the very end, enthusiasts. Thank you. And thank you for going through the streaming latency report. For those that joined, you would have an email with this recording and any other questions that you have. So please, please, please fill the survey form and be part of sharing your voice within the industry. And thank you for allowing me to moderate this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Florent. That was
Thank you very much,
great.
Lars.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.